Art is the act of sharing your humanity with others through an expressive medium. Hey, Beau.
Hello, John.
So you're in Spain, yeah?
I was in Spain. I was in
Oh,
Ibiza, but I'm no longer. I'm
oh,
in
where are
Bristol.
you
I'm
now?
back in the UK.
Ah, so now is that kind of home base-ish,
It,
sort of?
um, it is yes. I mean, it's an interesting question. I'm deciding where I'm going to be in home base. I'm not exactly sure where that's going to be at the moment.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Huh. Interesting. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know. For me, I'm just more of a vagabond than a nomad.
Ah, yeah, there you go.
I think there's a difference between them. I was talking to a friend about this. Nomads seem to have a destination. I'm not sure. Vagabonds, I don't know. They just more wander. They follow the
Well, I
wind.
think there's a bit of that Alan Watts in that, the idea of he wrote a book, sort of, I think it was called uh, something about being in the clouds, wandering destination unknown. And I
Yeah.
guess he would like to go on these little walks in Marin County when he was living in Mill Valley. And he just kind of wandered. He just didn't know where he was going to go. He didn't know when he was going to be back. And there was just that joy of wandering. Although this was, within a kind of a, I don't know, 2 hour walk or something like that. But the
Yeah.
Marin headlands, are vast. You can just go forever.
Yes. It's beautiful there. And I mean, as you know, with all the vagabonding I've been doing for the last, it's going to be getting on towards a year.
Yeah.
Because it started in early March. And in each step, there was a destination, but I wasn't clear on how I was going to get there,
Ah.
right?
Mhm.
And nor was it clear on the route I would take. And in
Ah.
retrospect, it kind of reminds me of a child. Uh, and maybe I shouldn't say that, but when you're walking with a child and you're going from A to B. I remember when mine were young, and they still sort of do.
Yep.
You're going there, right? And they
Yeah.
don't do that. They go like
No.
this. They go like this. They go about 8 times the distance that you walk. And then
Yep.
they're jumping and they're sprinting and then they stop and then lie down and they go right and they go left, um,
Yep.
for no apparent reason other than to not go straight.
Oh,
But of course,
yeah.
there
I'm trying
is
to
a reason in their
remember.
mind, right? There is
Yeah.
a reason in their mind, um, or it's very spontaneous. They're responding in the moment to suddenly, oh, there's a squirrel, oh, there's something, and they change their direction, but there's still an overall direction. Um, and I mean, it makes me wonder. I mean, of course, that overall direction is usually determined by the parents. Like, we're
Yes.
going this way. It makes me wonder
Yeah.
if, as a metaphor, what is for those of us who wander, what's
Yeah.
the parent that's guiding us? I wonder if that's our own internal. There's an internal parent that's guiding us forward.
Yeah. The little, good angel, bad angel, and one of them sort of guiding you a certain way. I don't know if it's that binary, but
Mm.
yeah, my very first book was called "Wandering the Garden of Technology and Passion."
Mm. Oh.
Yeah.
And what did you conclude from that?
Well, the title of the book was more describing what I was doing. And I have a thing where I've told clients this, but they don't get it, so it's a little dangerous. But what I tell them is, we do all this programming where we're listening to the client, we're listening to the site, we're trying to figure out, you know, what kind of building we should build
Yeah.
and what the emotional overlays are that go with that building. And it gets very complex, and you get all this data, too much data, and you don't really know what to do with it all. And I say, what I do is we listen, and then we forget everything. and then build back up from there. And they get really spooked. It's like, well, what's the point of listening if you forget everything? So they don't really understand. And one time it was musicians, and I thought they'd get this, but so I had to go back and try to figure out how to explain it to them a little bit better. But the idea is that, you know, you've got too many things, and you have to sort of prioritize them in a way. And you shouldn't ideally, you know, have a prejudice about what's most important, but it starts to percolate up after you have that base of knowledge. So I think for me, that process is wandering a bit, because it also, architects then tend to look at all those things and they reduce them back to words, which is good and bad. And when they reduce them back to words, they try to form sentences in a way, and they try to form concepts. And they don't think about the design or the emotional overlays necessarily. They just start connecting words. And then they develop a concept, and then they design the building.
Yeah.
And I say, no, you shouldn't do that way. You do that, but in combination, you should start playing with form and playing with geometry and playing with emotions, and do these things simultaneously overlapping. And they have a really hard time with that. They want to decide what the concept is and then create a form that serves the concept. And I found that if you do both of them together, they inform each other.
For sure.
And you're wandering in both sides.
Yeah.
And you don't know what the end result's going to be, other than it's going to be a building generally. I mean, 99% of the time it's going to be a building, because every once in a while an architect will go through the process and say, you shouldn't build a building. But it's really rare. And not just because we get paid to design buildings, but you know, that's not a small thing, but because sometimes, you know, that isn't the solution, but it's really rare that that's not the solution. So we do know there is that destination, but we don't know what kind of building. So I like the wandering technique, but it drives the kids crazy in the office and everybody else.
Interesting. So this is about the artistic submission that you sent.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Now see,
but we
I don't remember
want
which
to link them
poems I
back.
gave you, and poems and drawings, maybe. I can't remember exactly what I sent now.
So, well, I mean, let's talk about, you know, your art.
Yeah.
And how you, and because that, of course, is part and parcel of everything you do. It's not separate from what you do. You layer it all together in your creations, whether it be an architectural building or the paintings I've seen you make or the poetry that you make. So paint a picture for people about, first of all, who you are, and why you're doing what you're doing in relation to the art that was submitted to us that we're going to put up, but also why you care about it.
Yeah, I think for most of the artists that I know, you know, most of them feel that being an artist is a calling, and you don't have a choice. You can suppress it, but it's sort of always there, and it won't let go. And you know, you can distract yourself, and you can do other things, and so for me, it's sort of always been that way. Like, there was this need to express something, and that need, just like the child wandering, that need was there before I could articulate what it means. And I think when you go on this journey, you know, at certain points in time, you have these little epiphanies. And there's a visual poem that I created with Jeremy Mendy as a series of visual poems that was an Epiphany Palm. And the Epiphany Palm, and the process of doing the poems is really interesting because he did the graphic, you know, the graphic representation of it, but it was really the journey of trying to get him to understand what it meant, which was two-sided. I mean, it was not two-sided, it was porous. So I would make statements and he would say, well, what do you really mean by that? And I'm not sure you're right about that. And so the process itself led to a greater understanding of where that moment was wandering to. And then even as I might say, oh, well, maybe this is what this means, you know, the next moment it might wander to something else. So the Epiphany Palm and the experience with Burning Man led me to a statement I have right now about what art is. for me. And so art for me is, art is the act of sharing your humanity with others through an expressive medium. And that sounds a little technical for me. I'd rather it was a little more poetic, because so it catches you emotionally as well. But it's the idea of sharing your humanity with others, through an expressive medium. So you could share something with others in a non-expressive medium. You could share money, you could share technology, you could share different things. But when you're sharing your humanity, I think that is the artistic act. And I think that when you reduce what we all do, it's like you have a spark inside of you. And that's, that spark, as you get older, gets a little more repressed, and, it has limitations on it. And society and yourself, in order to protect yourself, you put a box around it and you let it out once in a while. And that's why I think art can be so precious, is when that spark goes between two people, or the artist and a group of people. It's an extraordinary thing, and you feel it, literally in your bones. There's that flush, that sort of, some people take it to the point where they cry, or they, as you're crying for something that's just touching. And it doesn't mean that art is just empathy, but I think there's an aspect to it that goes back to that core. And people have different versions of the humanity that they're sharing. Sometimes it's very simple, sometimes it's very sentimental, sometimes it's very abstract. But I think the origin goes back to the same thing, because the things that artists share are quite precious.
I agree that what artists share is quite precious, though I'd like to generalize the concept of art, personally, and the concept of humanity. I wonder if one's humanity is actually constructed through interaction, that it doesn't exist other than in interaction.
Yeah, I think there's an innate thing, like, that's inside of you, that everybody has this spark. I mean, people call it different things. I mean, there was a movie that was called like 7 grams or something. It was this idea that when you die, your body loses a certain amount of weight, and they think that's the soul. And the dilemma is you can never know these things, right? So you can never know if what you believe is like, was that the soul going somewhere? Did it have a physical instantation, or is that just, an error in measurement? And how would someone know exactly that was the thing, right? Or how would someone know that God exists if you believe in God? So you have to take a bit of faith in all of that. And I'm not sure, if I don't believe it matters which God you believe in. I don't know if it matters, exactly. It's just that you believe in this spark.
Well, yes, and I like the idea of a spark, because spark gives a sense of energy, the concept of energy, though energy is maybe quite an overused word. In some sense means it has a literal meaning. And then it's used in so many other ways, and I understand the connotation of it. And I was writing recently about how, you'll know about Maslow's hierarchy. And that we need, food and warmth, etc. And of course, as physiological beings, we need that. Our cells need that to stay alive. But I was also suggesting that, so I'll use a different word, but we'll relate it back to a spark, that your cells also need a reason. Right? And that's actually quite remarkable. If you just the contemplation of that. And is it true? Well, it seems to be true, because you can have people that have everything they need in terms of Maslow's hierarchy, right? Yeah. But if they don't have a reason, they deteriorate and die and commit suicide, etc. You have couples who were deeply in love for decades, and one dies, and within hours the other one does. Now, in terms of physiology, in terms of energy, warmth, sugar, ATP, etc., nothing has changed. What's changed is the reason. The reason for the existence was lost. men, oh, actually anyone, but historically the research was done on men who retire early, they
Yeah.
tend to die much sooner than those who continue to work.
Yeah.
So we need this reason, so that spark, right? As you're saying, it seems that our cells need a spark, but that spark seems to be found in the existence of other sparks, right? And
I
that's what I
think,
mean
yes,
about
I
that
think in
interaction.
context, because so imagine, the Twilight Zone, or where you're the last human being. It would take an incredibly strong-willed person to really thrive in that context, because you do need the other sparks all around you.
Exactly. But if you think about that, cells needing other cells, I need your cells, but your cells happen to be, the density of your cells happen to be wrapped in a different membrane that's sort of physically separate from mine, and yet mine need yours to survive. Because I wonder whether what we need more than anything is that sense to exist. And whether, if you don't have that sense, and how do you have that sense of existence? You have that sense of existence by affecting the world. You push something and it moves.
Back and forth, yes.
Right? If it didn't move, how would you know you existed? Your brain needs that sense of, I push on the table and the table is resisting against me, right? I speak back. So I have an effect in the world. Now what my brain knows, oh, you exist. But without that, you have that sense of being a ghost. So what I'm wondering is whether this spark can actually exist outside the context of interrelationship, and whether part of the challenge we have is thinking that we are independent.
Well, I think my wandering is taking me to the notion that everything is a balanced dynamic, and that there's a series of seemingly paradoxical relationships that are based on words, generally. So we need others, and we also have a strong desire to be independent. So we have these two things, and it's actually not just two things, it's a multiple of things, which makes it very complex and hard to grasp, right? But the idea is it's a dynamic. And so we don't want to be completely alone, but we also don't want to be completely at the service of others. But the beauty I think of life is the dynamic between those things, like how they collide and how they push and pull back from each other. So you never find perfect stasis, right?
No.
Where it's perfect balance.
Yeah, in biology we call that a dynamic equilibrium. That you're constantly looking for the equilibrium.
But they don't last, right?
They don't last. It's always in a moment.
On the other end of the spectrum, there's writing poetry, which you can do completely by yourself, and you don't need anybody else. You can just sit down with a piece of paper or your laptop or whatever mechanism you're going to use to record your idea, your poem. And but at the same time, the poem that is in a vacuum is somewhat not meaningless, but not very meaningful. And that's where, as an architect, you always are sharing everything that you're doing. As a poet, for me, going from a poet, that never shares. I mean, that's not what I was doing, but poets that never share to one that then puts it out there. That is a huge leap to me of humanity, is to start to share your poetry.
Yes.
So we have this range of what you're doing and what impact it has, and its purity. So architecture is highly collaborative. I mean, not always, not every part of it's highly collaborative, but broadly it is, because you don't bring the money to build it. Burning Man art projects aside, you don't bring the money to build it. You're not your own client. You're not going to inhabit the building. I mean, one of the saddest things for me is the first time I did a really, really beautiful building that I fell in love with, I realized I'd never experienced that building other than the day it opened. And that building was wholly for everybody else. And And there was this, I designed this penthouse once for this guy who was a friend, and he wasn't there very often. He lived based in London, and so at the beginning, while we were when he just finished doing it, I still had a key and I still had the passcode, and he'd have me go over there once in a while to kind of do something, which I was happy to do. But I realized when he asked wanted the key back, a part of me felt like it died, because this was my baby and I would never have it again.
Yes.
But that's what architects do, right? Is we design things for others.
So what if what you need for a building to be successful, architecture to be successful, in the same way you need for a poem to be successful, is that reason, that spark, that the building itself has that spark, that a poem can have that spark, but that meaning of the poem, the meaning of the building only exists as soon as someone enters it, as soon as someone reads that poem. Otherwise it doesn't exist. But when you write a poem, in the best poems, the person adds themselves to it. In the same way that when someone comes into a building, they are adding themselves. Now the building's actually alive. It's when, I travel a lot. It's why I love to have people in my home when I'm not there, because now the space is alive. It's dead if I'm not there. It's dead if no one's there, right? It brings it alive. And so similarly, can't a building be a poem in this very much the same way?
Fascinating concept for an art piece.
I think that's maybe a good concept on which to enter, enter the day, but because you're starting your day, I'm coming more to the end of my day, but to the end of this conversation, because I'm aware you also have something coming up.
Yeah.
So, but thank you so much, John, for submitting your work. And also the conversation and our continued conversations, right?
Oh yeah. No, this is a lot of fun.
This is more formal version of what we do anyway, often covered in dust.
Yes. There's that wonderful place in the dust that hopefully will be there this year. Although sadly, I'm imagining that if it happens, which I really hope it does, that it's going to be very difficult to bring the art piece that I had designed with Cynthia, just because the amount of time to build it. But that blip in the process might actually be a good thing. I think we're going to find out that there's going to be less art, perhaps, but maybe more humanity.
Yes.
I don't know. We'll see.
Well, as you say, we have to let these things go. We have to let go what the way we think it was supposed to be. Or at least the specific expression of what it was supposed to be, right?
Yeah, but we know from the playa, the experience, since it changes so much and it can go from extremes, that part of the joy is being disrupted that way, right? And then having to adapt.
Yes, but within a context, disruption by itself can be a tremendous trauma. It can be a real pain. I mean, I don't mean like a pain in the ass. I mean like
a survival equation. Yeah.
So it's the context in which disruption happens that many people forget is so important. It's not disruption for the sake of it. I don't believe a rebel who's a rebel for the sake of it is a true rebel, because they're still doing it in relation to. I think the best rebels, the people who are most rebellious, didn't know they were.
Yeah.
So, and you'll be one of those, I think.
Well, yeah, it's a journey, right?
It's a journey.
But thank you for embracing the work and for the interview and for being you and what you're doing, which is great.
Thanks, John.
I love the concept of the misfits wandering the earth, not quite sure exactly where they're going.
That's right. Yeah. All right. Lovely to see you. We'll see you on the West Coast soon.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Much love.